Bihari Jaya Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Rajagacharya, Sadasi Sveta E.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Parems Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shama Kunda Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Jamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Samavetta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to the Assembly of devotees, all glories to the Assembly of devotees, all glories to the Assembly of devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswata Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesha Tadane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 11 Chapter 2 verse 51. Nayasya jama karma bhyam navana shrama jati bih asajate sminaham bhavo dehe vaisa hare priyaha. There is not yasya, of whom janma, by good birth, karma bhyam, or meritorious acts, not vanashrama, by adherence to rules of occupation or religious duty. Jati B, or by belonging to a certain class of society. Sajjate, attaches itself. Asmin, in this body. Aham bhava, egotistic sentiment. Dehe, in the body. Vai, indeed. Sa, he. Hare, to Lord Hari. Priya, is dear. Translation: birth in an aristocratic family and the execution of austere and pious activities certainly cause one to take pride in himself. Similarly, if one enjoys a prestigious position within society because his parents are highly respected members of the Varnashram social system, one becomes even more infatuated with himself. But if despite these excellent material qualifications one does not feel even a tinge of pride within himself, he is to be considered the dearmost servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: according to Srila Sridhar Swami, the word janma, good birth, refers to such classes as the Murdva Vasiktas, children of Brahmana fathers and Kshatriya mothers, and Ambastas, children of Brahmana fathers and Vaishya mothers, both of which are considered anuloma since the father comes from a higher caste. Marriages in which the mother comes from a higher caste and the father is called pratiloma. In any case, one who becomes proud of his so-called prestigious birth is certainly in the bodily concept of life. Birth in any material body is a serious problem which one should solve by surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can thereby release himself from the golden shackles of a so-called aristocratic material body. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Kanishta Adhikaris think that karma misra bhakti, or devotional service mixed with material endeavor, is the ultimate in spiritual life. They become attached to verses such as this. Varnashramachara vata purushena parapuman Vishnu arajate panta nanya tattosha karanam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 Varnas and Ashramas. Vishnu Purana 3.8.9. Thus they think that material work in which a portion of the fruits is offered to God forms the highest platform of human life. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there are several Smriti literatures that have encouraged such mixed devotional service. Such books are taken by materialistic devotees as facility for offending the holy name of the Lord because of egotistic attachment to the material body. Thus one thinks that a prestigious position in the Varnashram system, according to birth and so-called pious activities, is a prerequisite for becoming successful in life. But those who have actually taken shelter of the holy name of Krishna never boast about their birth in the material world, nor do they pride themselves on their so-called expertise in material work. As long as one's mentality is encumbered by the material designations of the Varnashram system, one has very little chance of becoming free from material bondage and establishing himself as dear to the Lord. In this regard, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emphatically declared that he could not identify himself with any Varnashram designation, such as that of a great intellectual or priest, a courageous warrior in the Lord's army, a brilliant businessman making money for the Lord, or the hardest worker for the Lord. Nor could Chaitanya Mahaprabhu identify himself as a stalwart brahmachari, noble householder, or an exalted sannyasi. These designations reflect material pride that can infiltrate the execution of devotional service. Although a devotee may carry out the standard duties of Varna ashram, his only designation is Gopi Bhartu Pada Kamalayor Das Das Anudasaha, the eternal servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord, the master of the gopis, Krishna. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when a devotee understands that the process of bhakti yoga is complete in itself, and he becomes absorbed in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, the supremely merciful personality of Godhead affectionately lifts such a first-class devotee onto his own lap. The Supreme Lord can be pleased only by unalloyed devotion and not by any arrangement of the gross body composed of 5 material elements, or the subtle body composed of innumerable speculations and bogus pride. In other words, Lord Krishna can never be pleased by one's so-called aristocratic body, which is due to be devoured by worms or vultures. If one becomes proud of his material birth and so-called pious activities, by such false pride one gradually develops the impersonal mentality of merely renouncing the fruit of work, or else the karmi mentality of enjoying the fruits of work. Neither the karmis nor the jnanis, speculators, are aware that the fruit of work actually belongs to Krishna. The conclusion is that one should carefully give up all false pride and always remember that he is a humble servant of Krishna, as stated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Amani na manadena kirtaniya sada harish. Translation: birth in an aristocratic family, execution of austere and pious activities certainly cause one to take pride in himself. Similarly, if one enjoys a prestigious position within society because his parents are highly respected members of the Varnashram social system, one becomes even more infatuated with himself. But if despite these excellent material qualifications, one does not feel even a tinge of pride within himself, he is to be considered the dearmost servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here we have another characteristic of the Uttama devotee. Of course, as I mentioned previously, we find the perfection of these qualities in the Uttama devotee, but that does not mean that the Madhyama should not also strive for such a quality, such as here non-identification with birth and whatever. But it reaches its perfection in the Uttama devotee. As explained here, it is very difficult to give up these designations. And it may be very subtle, but nevertheless very difficult to give them up. And therefore, the Uttama devotee, one who's fixed in either very high bhava or prema, naturally has no identification with the material body, so he doesn't have any identification with his varna or his ashram, etc. That shows that it may be difficult for people to give up such designations, and therefore, if one is in prema, then that would take place. But again, people on the lower level of Madhyama should also not be attached to their varna and ashrama, etc., and identify with that. What is the problem with that? As Lord Chaitanya explains, this is all external. We designate people with titles of varna and ashrama. Of course, the external title also indicates some gunas, which are not exactly external in one sense, but so they're there to indicate gunas of a person in an ideal sense. So the Brahmana should be sattvic, and the Kshatriya should be sattva mixed with rajas, and the Vaishya should be Vaishya mixed with tamas, and the Sudra should be tamas predominantly. So that's their general characteristics. So they're designated according to gunas. But then, of course, we'll have so much variety within that as well, and then we'll have exceptional cases where a Sudra doesn't show Sudra qualities, or a Brahmana doesn't show Brahmana qualities. But nevertheless, people may be proud of their designation, in spite of the fact they don't have the proper qualification or gunas. So that becomes a real problem. But even if we're proud of our varna because we are following properly, that also is a problem because, again, it is gunas. The varnas are attached to the gunas are material. So again, we have a material identification that's got to do with our body. We get a body in a certain guna, in a certain varna by our karma. So it's a material characteristic. And if we become attached to that, then that means we're attached to our material identification. And then how we can understand what we're Atma, and the Atma is a servant of Krishna. It's very, very difficult to do so. So if we identify with our body in any way, varna or no varna, ashram or no ashram or whatever, still we identify ourselves with our body. This is an obstacle to our advancement. We know the 10th aparad to the holy name, to remain materially attached even after understanding so many glories of the chanting of the holy name, etc. So this indicates that, of course, if we're in prema, that we don't have any identification, and if we're madhyama, we still have some identification because false ego is still there, etc. So, but nevertheless, we don't completely identify with our material body, etc. The more we identify with our material body, the more of an obstacle it becomes. And if we refuse to give up that material identity completely, then this is the 10th aparad. We like Krishna, but we like our body more. So therefore, we never want to give up our material identity in this life. So then it's a difficult circumstance, like the example of the boatman on the river. So the wedding party is going up the river. So they decide, okay, we'll rent the boat overnight, and we'll get there in the morning, pay the boatman, and we all go to sleep nicely on the boat, and we wake up in the morning, we're at the next village, and we can go to the wedding ceremony. So go up, just pay the boatman to do so. So they all get on the boat very happily at night time and pay the boatman, and they tell him to, pull up the river all night like that, and then they expect in the morning when they get there that, okay, we'll be at the next village and we can celebrate the wedding. So they happily go to sleep, and they wake up in the morning, and then they get up and they think, oh, it's the next village, and they look out and say, hey, we're in the same place. And then they look at the boatman and say, well, you've been sleeping all night. He says, no, I've been heavily working all night with this going up the river. And they have a big argument. And then someone looks in the water and says, oh, the anchor is still in the thing. And so you don't go anywhere no matter how much endeavor you take. So they ended up in the same spot. So, in spite of knowing everything, if we decide I want to stay in the material world, nothing is going to help us get out of the material world. We can do so much sadhana that we're holding on like this to the material world, we can't get out. Can't go anywhere. So, it may not only be material identity with a particular varna or ashram or job or position or whatever. It could be so many other attachments we may have in the material world identity, whatever. And this can cause a problem. An obstacle to us. So the whole process of devotional service, of course, is kleshagni. It uproots all of these obstacles. Ultimately, avidya is uprooted. And avidya is the cause of all this false identity in the material world. So through the process of devotional service, this will automatically be uprooted, provided we at least have a willingness to give up the identity. It may be difficult to give up, but we should have a willingness to give it up and then practice bhakti yoga enthusiastically, and then we can perfect ourselves in that way. So all of this, these obstacles, anarthas, material identity, etc. Obviously the material identity leads to desires for enjoyment in this lifetime, or desires in the next lifetime. It will lead to what we call the weakness of heart, hridaya dorbalya, such as matsarya or pratishta or lobha or kutinati, all these different, we'd say, anarthas that grow up, envy or duplicity or longing for position or greed. So these are called the weeds in devotional service in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So these will automatically be there as long as that ahankara is very, very strong. And so that, and they say the avidya is very strong. Then all these things are liable to grow up. So, of course, the process of bhakti is the opposite of that, avidya. That is, our faith itself gives us the qualification to practice bhakti, because in that faith we say, I am the servant of Krishna. We don't give up the I, or aham, but the aham is not in terms of my being the center, or the bhokta, the enjoyer. It is Krishna is the enjoyer. So by doing that, then we can negate that false identity. It may not go immediately, but gradually, through the process of bhakti, it becomes etc. is one aspect, but of course we think of many other identities also that one may have in this material world. Ultimately, we say the whole material personality and all of its anarthas are the problem, and as long as we have them and we're attached to them, it's an obstacle. The less attached we are to them, the easier we can give them up. And if we get the higher and higher, they're less and less until we get to Uttama stage, zero. These obstacles, anarthas, and attachments and identities become zero. So that's the ideal position for us. But we do have to start somewhere going in the right direction. So therefore, the very definition of Uttama Bhakti, to start our sadhana after we get the faith, is Anabhilashita Shunya. That we shouldn't have any other desire than the desire to please the Lord. So we don't have a desire to get pratishta, position or whatever. We don't have any identity with that, getting some pleasure out of our wealth or whatever like that. So all these other desires are suppressed. Of course, it's not an ideal state, because we're starting out with faith and we're starting bhakti, and we have a lot of anarthas. But the principle we're following in our bhakti is this. And therefore, this becomes what we call pure bhakti and sadhana. We're not pure, because only prema is pure, and we may have a false identity, etc. But the idea is that we're striving for that. And when we're practicing bhakti, we're not trying to increase our position and our money and our enjoyment, etc. Our consideration is to please Krishna. In spite of the fact that we do have the anarthas, and they're there, and they may even interfere with our bhakti. But if we explicitly mix our bhakti with other principles, which we call like karma Mr. Bhakti, then this is not the process we follow. We're following Uttama Bhakti. So in the mixed process, then, yes, we do bhakti, but we're also explicitly praying for material things, material benefits, or liberation, or siddhis, or whatever. So this is condemned. This is not the proper bhakti to practice for us. It can be done. It's better than nothing, because everybody can worship the Lord, but it's not the process that we follow in order to get prema. You can do karma Mr. Bhakti, and you can get some result. And it's better than doing nothing. So the four types of people surrender to the Lord: those who have desires, those who want to get rid of their suffering, etc. The Lord accepts them. Yeah, it's okay. But it's not the best type of bhakti, and it's not the bhakti which gives prema. So the root of our bhakti is this pure bhakti, Uttama Bhakti, which will lead to this highest stage here. If we do the mixed bhakti, then we don't get to this stage of prema. We get something else. When we get sarupya or salokya or something. So therefore, the intrinsic nature of bhakti itself must have this root of purity in it, in spite of the fact that we're not pure. At least our definition and our goal is that. If it's not our goal, if it's not our definition and our goal, then how can we achieve it? It's very difficult. We can go somewhere, but it's very, very slow. So that's what mixed bhakti is. So the kanishta may not even be thinking about pure bhakti or mixed bhakti or anything, but the tendency is it'll start getting mixed with material desires somewhere along the line, material conceptions or whatever. So therefore, we have to make a nice definition even at the very beginning to clarify our position and what we're striving for. As well as that, as mentioned here at the very end, very important is that Kirtaniya Sadahari, that in order to chant at all times, then we should not expect respect and give all respect. We should be humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. So this is also intrinsic to the very beginning of bhakti, and the very beginning of chanting. And that was pointed about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that along with the primary instruction was this, of all things. So intrinsic in bhakti itself is a sense of no position, no identity with the material body, etc. Certainly we do have, but at least we're not trying to enforce it. So we're trying to get rid of that identity, material identity completely, which may take many forms. But a lot of that identity is based upon position. I have a certain position in this world which I have to defend. That's the normal one. Of course, maybe the opposite is I have no position, so we have a very negative idea about everything. But most people have a position that they identify with in this world, and they try to enforce that in all their activities throughout life. So that's a type of pride again. Yeah? But as we see, the initial bhakti has to be without that pride, without that desire for respect, and giving respect to all others, which is the opposite, and being humbler than a blade of grass. So Sanatana Goswami has pointed out in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that the nature of the higher bhakti is greater humility. And that the greatest devotees have the most humility. And so the gopis are the highest devotees, and they feel the lowest of all. Of course they're the highest, but they feel the lowest. So they have no identity, oh, I am the best devotee. They'll say, I am the worst devotee. And of course that's even beyond, that's a spiritual identity, but even then they say I'm the worst devotee. They're not identifying with, varna or ashram or anything, or body or whatever, man, woman, or whatever. They're not doing that at all. But they're just thinking in terms of even their devotion, they're the lowest devotee. So the highest devotee has the most humility, which means that it must be very intrinsic to the whole process of bhakti itself, and the more you advance, the more that will manifest. So, in other words, the more we advance in bhakti, the less material identity we have with our position in this world. So in the beginning, yes, we will have some identity, but we don't try to encourage it or hang on to it or let it increase or whatever. We try to minimize it through the process of bhakti. So when we're practicing bhakti, then we also think of humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, giving respect to all those, not expecting respect for ourselves. So it becomes like a principle of our mood of bhakti, so that we can advance. So if we do that, then we'll see that the process works very nicely. If we don't do that, then we will see that it becomes very slow. And we get lots of obstacles. And attraction for the Lord is minimal. So we follow properly and we get very good result. So that is more or less the essence of this verse here.
Maharaj, you mentioned about the obstacle. At the level of prema, there is no obstacle, if I understand properly. But is it that the obstacle is not there, or even the obstacles is there, but he's not feeling any obstacles? I mean, he doesn't consider the obstacles.
It's not obstacle in the sense that prema has any contamination. There's definitely an obstacle of the material body as long as he has a material body. So that's why eventually the Lord takes him out of the material body and into the spiritual body, and there's no obstacle at all in that sense of because the material body limits his experience of prema to lower stages, and he cannot experience the higher elements. So therefore, when he's out of that body and he gets spiritual body, then he can have higher and higher experiences. To that extent, there is limitation. Otherwise, and that body, of course, is subject to sickness and accidents and whatever like that in this material world. So that's what we say, limitation of the material body.
Again, when you mentioned about the humility, Maharaj, there's like Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami or Thakur Bhaktivinoda says that I'm more worse than a worm in a stool and things like that. It is just not that they are saying it, they are just feeling like that actually.
Yeah, well, even Brahma is saying this in his prayers. I would like to be a blade of grass in Vrindavan. just a blade of grass. I'm no more qualified than that. So it's actually their perception of their own position in relation to the Lord and the other devotees.
Again, any material position is causing a havoc for a living entity in this material world, the pride, or the pride causes a problem. On the contrary, but in case of devotees, it is not so. We see the case of Shringi, we see the case of Ambarish, we see the case of Dhruvasa, we see the case of Parikshit or somebody. So the same position, it is not bringing a fall or a pride for a devotee, but on the contrary, for one who is not a devotee, this problem comes.
Yeah, well, in general, it may be in devotional service if it becomes a weed. In other words, there are obstacles or anarthas, and if we encourage them to grow, then they can grow also like weeds grow if we water them. So if we have an anartha of pratishta, longing for position, yes, by the devotional service it will disappear. But if we cultivate it, then of course it won't disappear. So if we make the weeds grow, then they get bigger and bigger. So you have to pull the weeds out or make sure they don't grow.
In case of Daksha Maharaj, is it he is son of Brahma? Is it a pastime, or in case of Daksha is actually
well, in one sense we could say all the Devatas and Prajapatis, they are vibhutis of the Lord, so we could say it's a pastime of sort. But it does illustrate, as long as one is in the material world, one can be.
Can I understand that Lord is directly involving, or he uses his agents? He has many demigods.
Well, it could be that, or it could be karma, it could be anything. The devotee, of course, takes it as the mercy of the Lord, and the mercy of the Lord is the karma itself, is a mercy for him that he's done something, and therefore he has to feel this experience to learn something. That's what the devotee feels. It could be directly the Lord, it may not be, it may be just be the aparad, it could be so many different things that are causing the problem.
Many times we find that, he's such a nice devotee, he did a lot of nice services, but still he has health problems and different problems. Yeah. Why is the Lord doing this? This question arises in minds of devotees.
Yeah. Well, that will arise in devotees who have less faith. A devotee who has faith, even if it happens to him, he doesn't mind it, and he says, okay, this is the mercy of the Lord, this is my karma, etc. That's how he will feel. Those who are less advanced, of course, may not have faith, and then they will blame the Lord or like that. So that will be a sign that they don't have that faith, that somehow the Lord is taking care of them. That's all it means. And of course, it could be due to imperfect bhakti, could be due to aparad, it could be so many things could be there that cause the problem.
What about others? The devotee may himself feel humble. The others who are seeing the defective devotee, he may think that, such a great devotee has problem. Will I also not get problem? His faith may weaken.
Well, on the other hand, he should see the quality of the devotee. The devotee tolerates everything, like more tolerant than a tree. So he should admire that quality and try to develop that quality himself.
Here we see in this verse that despite a devotee being secure in a particular varnashram, he does not have any pride in that.
Yeah.
So, Maharaj, in ISKCON we see that the ashramas exist, but we don't have so-called varnas. And but then we also see that devotees, at times there is a tendency to feel that one particular ashrama is better than the other ashrama, or initiated is better than non-initiated. So that kind of feelings are there in the society.
Yeah.
So how do we see that in the context of this verse?
Yeah. Well, we can say that the Varna ashram system is there, and it's external and has to do with gunas, etc., and material bodies. It has a use also to purify people and gradually, birth after birth, get them up to sattva guna or whatever like that. So it's not completely useless and has its purpose. At the same time, as Bhaktisiddhanta has quoted this verse here from Vishnu Purana, which we also tend to quote, supporting institution of Varnashram and ISKCON or whatever, and yet here he says the whole thing is useless. It's a material identity here, so he's giving a very negative context, in the sense that if you identify with this, it's that this is bhakti, to do this, that's the only bhakti, and it's the best bhakti, then it becomes an impurity, or as Bhaktisiddhanta says, mixed bhakti. That we say this is the perfect bhakti, to make sure that your varnashram is instituted within your bhakti. So it may or may not be there. The idea is that bhakti was independent, it's called independent, but we can use it favorably, definitely. At the same time, we don't depend on it. And we don't magnify it also and make it more important than the bhakti. We have to be very careful how we put the two together so that the bhakti predominates. That's all. In the process of doing that, then we may start identifying with, superior brahmanas better than kshatriya, vaishya, sudra. If we start instituting a varnashram system, then we get stuck again in committing aparadha against Vaishnavas. So it's very problematic to mix the two together in a very intimate way. And even with the ashramas, it's the same. We can do the same thing, and again, end up with material designations according to their material renunciation or whatever like that. And again, we can't judge devotees based on either of these criteria, that one is better than the other. So it doesn't measure bhakti, but it's useful in its context. As far as devotion is concerned, yes, we have distinctions of initiated, uninitiated, etc. It has a use also because scripture says you should take initiation, you should accept a guru, that which doesn't require initiation, but at least accept a guru. You take initiation, has many rules there, especially for deity worship, you have to take initiation. So it has its purpose. At the same time, if we solely identify advancement based on initiation, that also is not proper, because a person could be initiated but very fallen, or stop practicing or whatever, so it doesn't make him superior just because of that. So we can't classify people, their bhakti, based upon initiation, non-initiation, etc. But it has its use.
Maharaj, also I came across one quote where it was stated that the renunciates were treated by Lord Chaitanya as his sons, whereas others were treated as his servants.
See?
That among the devotees of the Lord, okay, those who were renounced were treated, Lord Chaitanya treated them as his sons.
Yeah.
And others were treated as, or understood as his servants. Mm-hmm. So there we see that there is some sort of distinction and probably more intimate connection between Lord Chaitanya and those who renounced and who were more...
Well, in one sense, but then if we look at the sannyasis in Lord Chaitanya's movement, we don't see so much pastimes with them, where we find more pastimes with Ramananda Roy and others. So, and an identity of gopis and whatever like that, of Vishaka or Lalita or whatever, it looks like they're more intimate. So I don't know what that ultimately means, sons and servants or whatever. Maybe externally he treated them like that, but internally it may be something quite different.
And Maharaj, I
would suppose because the sannyasi is the head of society in one sense, so therefore everybody else is servants. So then in that sense, that's the external aspect.
So Maharaj, when because this point regarding Varnashram in ISKCON is also, I've heard from devotees, I've also experienced a little bit that like places in Mayapur, like Mayapur, there's a lot of discussion about Varnashram and in our society and how it should be implemented. So, Maharaj, and Srila Prabhupada also quoted that 50% of work is still pending in terms of how to establish Varnashram, although details are not available and as much we would want to. So Maharaj, do we see that in case of community of devotees, devotion acquires prime priority and others are only for management of the social functions?
Possibly. Now somebody has said that quote of Prabhupada applies to not within ISKCON but outside ISKCON. So then it would be completely non-devotees.
Yeah, so I was coming to that, Maharaj. So what happens is, okay, those who are inclined towards devotional service, already ISKCON is there and that serves that purpose.
Yeah.
But then Prabhupada's compassion covered the entire population of the planet.
Yeah.
So those who are not inclined to become devotees, for them actually Varnashram, because Krishna doesn't give third option.
Yeah.
Either you become a devotee or you follow another yoga process, out of which other yoga process.
Well, actually the only process is Harinam, which is beyond Varnashram, either in Varnashram or outside. It's either. So it's inclusive of everything. So that's the ultimate. So in one place, Prabhupada said, institution of Varnashram is chanting Hare Krishna. So it makes the endeavor much easier to establish Varnashram. Just encourage everybody to chant Hare Krishna somehow or other. That's the purification in Kali Yuga, more than Varnashram even. Because how easy is it to institute Varnashram for the public?
For devotees it is difficult, then it will be impossible for...
Yeah. So it's much easier to tell them to chant Hare Krishna, isn't it? Destroy all their karmas once by accidentally chanting even.
In Varnashrama, many things are there. There are many elements, and we see some of the elements even they help in devotional life also.
Yeah. Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls them secondary rules of bhakti. Secondary rules. The mukhya rules is hearing, chanting, sadhusanga, deity worship, etc. Secondary rules are whatever, samskars and family rules, grihastha rules, etc.
Although you see this, some of the rules almost like a material. Almost like a material, like a samskar if you take. It's material, it's karma kandiya. But it helps a lot.
Well, no, we also, it's Vedic, so we can also relate it to the Lord. So if we do a samskar, we're not actually just praying to devatas, we're involving the worship of the Supreme Lord, so therefore it becomes spiritualized. At least in the Sakriya Sartifika, the devatas are taken out and worship of Vishnu is there.
And the question, Maharaj, you are saying the more one advances, he feels more lower, or he feels that he's nothing, he's not serving, like that. You are quoting example from Bhagavatamita. His devotees or gopis are thinking that they are not devotees, others are devotee. Okay, but we see that when there is a say that knowledge and humiliation doesn't go together. There is say, knowledge and humiliation.
Well, that's the same thing. Identity with body, with wealth, with position, with aristocracy, with varna, or with knowledge again. That knowledge is another one. All these different things could be causes of anartha, So we identify with knowledge. I am knowledgeable, I am pandit, I am this and that. And then we don't want to listen to anybody else.
No, in our day-to-day life, we see some devotees, those who are practicing Krishna consciousness maybe more than 20 or 30 years, when they hear something against them, immediately they get agitated. How can you say like this? I'm practicing Krishna consciousness more than 30 years, 20 years, like that, because they are not able to accept any correction or any request from others. They think that it's like you're humiliating me. So how to see this kind of statement?
Which statement?
If someone says something good, immediately he feels that for him it's like a humiliation. He takes it, how can you say like this? Do you think you know better than me? Out of pride, 20 years practicing Krishna, still is not able to accept something very important.
I mean, criticism.
What do you say? Some correction or some...
Well, maybe it depends on how you say it also. So if done in the proper way, maybe he can accept it. If done in a different way, he won't accept it. So we have to try different means if there is a problem.
Even you see, even in a life history of that, different devotees in Brihad Bhagavatamita, each devotee is claiming himself that, he's not a devotee.
Yeah.
Others are devotee. But in the life of devotee, we see that, they think themselves as a devotee and others are not devotee.
Well, yeah, that's again the opposite of what is said here. Amani namana dena kirtanya sahari. We give respect to all others and not for ourselves. So it's a basic principle of bhakti itself. And if it grows and grows, then that means it's a weed.
Whereas we see in well-known literatures, Vedic literature. A potter can be a devotee, a fighter can be a devotee, and a farmer can be a devotee. So Varna doesn't come in anything. It can be a devotee in any status. See, in our moment, instead of we say when Varnashram is only Goshala and farming. But it can be when somebody can be handloom weaver, somebody can make pots, somebody can mridanga, and he can still be a devotee. Not that everybody does puja in the temple and.
Yeah. Well, but then why we call it Varna ashram then? Just call it ashrama.
No, naturally, some devotee like to talk, some like to work.
Okay. Yeah.
It's an ignorant quality is there. We can't force a devotee who's working in thing and give a class. He may not understand the higher philosophy.
Of course, in that sense, it's not Varna as traditionally defined. We're doing bhakti according to our propensities and what we like to do, more or less. But we can't attribute that to Varna in the sense of material qualities. That I'm preaching, therefore I'm in Sattvagun, and you are making pots, therefore you're in Tamagun.
So can be in Sattvagun.
The whole idea of Varna becomes different when we want to apply it to devotees. It has to be different. And therefore it is not inferior to make pots than to preach also, because it's not Tamagun and Sattvagun. So it's all service to the Lord. So we can say a garland maker is a Sudra in Tamagun. But if you're making, in the spiritual world, everybody's making garlands for Krishna. Is everybody's Tamagun? No.
As long as he keeps Krishna in center, he's a devotee.
So the whole idea of Varna becomes quite different if we're going to apply it to devotees.
Regarding this pride, like we see that Brahmins, they think we are Brahmins, and they treat the other lower Shudras. There is a problem in Tamil Nadu, and they became so puffed up, and they started disrespecting other areas, and now they're put down. So this in Shringi, same thing happened to Shringi. Like Kuvera's son, they thought my father is very rich. So even devotees sometimes when they get opulence, name, fame, there's always chance that I am the best devotee, we are the best sampradaya, ISKCON is the best, others are useless. All
this again is this false identity we crop up, and it can be a weed.
Chanting should actually remove all this, like chanting.
But it's like weeds can grow up if you don't cut the weeds down. Then the bhakti stops growing and the weeds grow bigger. That's the problem.
Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.